first and foremost, brother Jim, a big aloha mahalo, man, and it's great to after the several times of having you on, it's great to have you back on. So thank you.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, I do remember you.
good to see you after all this time. I remember our fond experiences doing interviews here in Honolulu, including over at the Blue Note, I guess it was last time, and then one time a long time ago, Hawaiian Brian's when brother Chris was with us. How is Chris?
I'm not actually sure. I don't know. I think he's got dementia now.
And he had a
So
stroke,
I'm.
right?
He had some strokes,
Right.
and he had to give up playing, and then he suddenly got worse and worse. I can't see. I haven't spoken to him for a long time.
That's a drag. Well, I'm bummed that those were fun memories. I'm glad we have good video of it too, actually, of us sitting there
Yeah, yeah, it was
talking and
good.
stuff. Yeah, and then you came back again with the boys.
Oh, very nice. I always loved going to Hawaii. Always had a good time there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we had a lot of fun. And last time you were with us, the Yardbirds were tearing it up at the Blue Note, Hawaii, if you recall. Any memories of playing there, or do they all kind of blend together?
No, I think the Blue Note was great because it was. I remember we went from Blue Note Hawaii, I think, to Blue Note. Oh no, the other way around. We came from Tokyo, so we played the Blue Note Tokyo, and I think probably the Blue Note Tokyo was the best gig I ever did. The best in terms of looking after you. The Blue Note Hawaii was good too. But the Tokyo one was great.
Oh, you mean them
What?
taking care of you? They're this
Yeah, 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 yeah. They really did look after us.
they know what they're doing. That's a great way. I love all the Britishisms, the way they look after us.
That's right. Yeah.
It's great, man.
Well,
Well, I do
well,
this astronomy bit every week called Stargazer, and the cat is from England, so it's I get a taste of his Britishisms each week. We joke about them. So,
okay.
and first, where are you joining us from today as part of the show?
I'm in France. I'm down the south. I suppose the biggest city nearby is Nice.
And name the city. Are you comfortable naming the city you're in, or do you like to keep it in the book? I guess it's sort of in there, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just in a little village called Bargemon, which is
Bargeron.
about an hour and a half northwest of Nice.
It's really cool. Well, it factors in She Walks in Beauty, my quest for the bigger picture, which we're going to get into in a moment. But as I was telling you ahead of time, you're part of a series we're doing. It's called Off the Road, and it started right when the pandemic sort of stopped all the internationally touring artists who used to come to Hawaii and really were the bulk of who we talked to on the show. Really, they stopped coming, so we started connecting with musicians like yourself around the world, hearing how the pandemic had touched their lives at first, also hearing about new projects like your book, also getting some classic stories in there some people have played for us. And so take us back when the pandemic first arrived, where you were when you first began to hear about it. Any ways those first days were either dramatic, intense, any interesting stories, how it affected, your career, your life, any other scary or dicey moments that folks would relate to.
Well, I'd say it was quite dramatic for me because I think time I was away, we played in Seattle. We did a cruise, and then we ended up playing a couple of gigs in near Seattle.
About
And
when?
then,
What was the time frame?
yeah, this would have been the early part of 2020.
Oh, okay. So like February or January or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I remember flying back from Seattle, and I don't know, I got a bug on the aeroplane, and I kept coughing, and I had to go into Paris, and I couldn't get the flight back because I felt so awful, and it it took me such a job to get off the connection. I don't want this connection. I'm not very well. And they said, "Oh, you have to go and see the doctor." And there was a doctor at Paris airport, and he checked me up, and he said, "Oh, well, it's not on your chest, so I don't think COVID was an issue in that. It was just before it happened.
Okay.
Uh, said, you've got a flu, just take these pills and go back home and look after yourself. And of course, I went back home. My wife was being sort of semi-cared for because she had cancer. And she'd had some friends with her from England looking after her. And then I suppose she was a bit disappointed I wasn't very well.
Right.
But I came back and I got better in a few days. And then I was looking after her. This was around February. And she gradually got worse. And she was in the house being cared for by the local nurses and everything. And she passed it in June. Her cancer just got worse and she went downhill. And she was finally on a like a support system. She was on that terrible drug they give you. I can't remember what it is.
Morphine.
Morphine, and she was in a coma for a few days, and then she passed. She passed over.
So sorry, brother Jim. It's such a heavy story, man.
Yeah. It was sad, but out of sadness came a lot of different things. Most of all, because I wanted to find out what had happened to her.
Right.
I was very determined. I wanted to find out. So I was looking first of all at YouTube documentaries of near-death experiences, and I'd followed various mediums, and I did courses. Actually, I did a course in mediumship in the end, right. So I could communicate with my wife, and it basically led to a sort of new world for me, and it's gone on, ever since. Got better and better, got broader and broader, and I know it was a pretty bad experience at the time. I mean, it was the worst in my life, but now I can see myself growing out of it. I've done the book all about it. I put in lots of bits of evidence that came through from my wife, physical evidence, because the medium I studied was somebody called Suzanne Giesman,
right,
who was formerly in the US Navy, and she was a very high-ranking officer in the US Navy, so she's very grounded. And she lost her stepdaughter in Iraq. She was actually struck by lightning. And as soon as that happened, she decided she wanted to be a medium. And she studied in England in the Arthur Findlay College in Guildford in south of England. She went back to the States and she, became an established medium. And she's quite a powerful medium now. She has a big following, and she does courses. And I signed up and I found it very, very good. And she always stressed that you need physical evidence from anyone you speak to across the veil, she says. Ask them for things about somebody that you wouldn't know, or things that are going to happen to you, or things you're going to see. And quite a few of these things have happened. And I talk about it in the book.
Yeah, you give a lot of examples in the book, but let's just back up a second, because in a lot of ways the book is, and we're talking about She Walks in Beauty, My Quest for the Bigger Picture, from Jim McCarty, Yardbirds legend here. But it didn't just begin then with Lizzie's passing in 2020. The book's focus really is a lifetime of spiritual curiosity. Kind of explain for folks, because when they think Yardbirds, they may not realize it's a very different approach than your typical rock musician's story, and the spiritual curiosity and the search that you've really been on.
Yeah. Well, I would say this has happened. Yeah, this has happened since I've been a child.
Right.
I've always been very interested in things that are quite paranormal, say, not quite, things out of the ordinary. And it sort of got better when we were on the road, and I used to spend a lot of time with Keith Ralph, the singer,
Of the
and
Yardbirds.
of the Yardbirds, and we used to talk about all this stuff, spiritual advancement and being reborn and UFOs and all these sort of things, sort of out of the ordinary that we don't really know much about. But we were always very interested. And I sort of went through my life. I got involved in spiritual healing, and I got involved in Buddhism as well. And I traveled with my wife on various pilgrimages to India and China and Sikkim and places which were fascinating and very, very mind altering experiences.
Right.
And so it went from there. And of course, being I had sort of my beliefs, but being hit with that sudden loss, you suddenly have to say, oh well, do I really, what do I really believe? And I've come to the conclusion now that yes, I realise the consciousness does carry on. It doesn't die with the body, and we all carry on. It's energy, and energy can't be destroyed, as they say. And we're all going on somewhere else, wherever that is. But it seems to be quite a nice place, from what I can gather.
Well, you offered, and before I had you, I wanted to just make sure we set it up a little bit about how the book works and that it does. It's a lifetime journey, and he shares a lot of stuff, including the connection with Yardbirds frontman Keith Relf, and we'll hear maybe a little more about Keith if we have time coming up. But backing up, you said you went to this medium, Suzanne, the woman who is a Navy vet, and you mentioned there were some things that were just very convincing about the experience with her. When you reflect on that now and talk about that sense that consciousness continues after a person is here, and this woman offering proof, offer people some of the highlights either from the book or just in your memory that you think are the most convincing ways that woman made you feel that you were definitely connecting with Lizzie, your late wife.
Well, of course I did a deliberate sort of session every day from what I'd learned. I went through a series of sort of a meditation and a series of breathing and expanding the aura, and writing down the messages I got from my wife. But some of the great ones, I think probably the best one in the book was I was talking to someone on the west coast of America called Mariah, who's our tour manager now, and my wife didn't actually know. She knew who she was, but she didn't know her very well. So I said, "Oh, this is in my meditation, my communication. Tell me something about Mariah that I don't know." And I immediately saw this skipping rope. I saw a woman skipping. So I called up Mariah and I talked about the business, whatever we needed to talk about. And I came to the end of the conversation. I said, "Well, by the way, Mariah, do you like skipping at all?" And she said, "Well, I used to when I was a kid, but not anymore." So I explained. I said, "Well, I've just had this session with Lizzie, my wife, and she told me there's a skipping rope involved with you in some way." So she said, "Oh, hold on a minute." She said, "I'm a big fan of Salvador Dali." And Salvador Dali, the Spanish artist, he used to, in his paintings, he used to put Alice in Wonderland skipping in the corner of a lot of his paintings. And in fact, I did a homage to Dali, which is on the wall behind me. I couldn't see it, I was just talking audio. She said I did a homage to Dali, and she sent it to me, and it was like somebody skipping. It was a big, a sort of embossed painting come sculpture of somebody skipping.
Wow.
which was quite amazing, and that's in the book. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably one of the best examples.
That's neat that you also did this. You mentioned it too. A friend of yours recommended this Buddhist Lama, and you'd go on pilgrimages with him to India, Nepal, China. These are kind of experiences that most folks listening probably have not had. Share when you think of those three that I just named, and there could be others, but with those three or any, share any of the most remarkable stories. Some of it is summed up in the book, which is cool. But for the radio folks, I'm sure they would dig it when you think back to one of them. And explain like who this guy was and why you would do it, and then pick one of those great adventures you went on and tell us about it.
He was very interesting. A, a friend told me about him, and I was saying, oh, can you recommend any of the Buddhist lamas? And she said, oh, there's this particular one, and she said he speaks English and he's very funny. And so I thought, oh, I'll go and see him. This was before I met Lizzie. So I went to a few sessions, a sort of workshop thing, and we did sort of chanting and stuff. And he did, he was very, very funny. He spoke, and he made such sense. And I was there for about a week, and I remember when I came out of there, when I went home, I felt so different. I felt really peaceful. And when I was driving the car, I wasn't frustrated, with other drivers, or I was so. I mean, it only lasted probably a couple of weeks, but
There was
I
an
thought,
effect.
yeah, there must be something in this. And then we sort of kept following him, and we were really quite enamored with this man. He was so sort of magical. He seemed to have a real power about him, but he was so nice to be with.
And so these
Now,
pilgrimages, go to the most remote one. Where was it? Because you went to some remote places.
yeah, the most remote one was in Ladakh, which is it's part of India. It's in the uh, northwest of India, so it's sort of towards Pakistan,
Where
and
did
it's
you fly
very.
into?
We flew into Leh, which is the capital, and then of course, we go off to. We stayed in a place in Leh first of all, and then we went off in these jeeps um, right into Ladakh, and we stayed right near a nunnery. And in fact, the nuns are famous because they're called the Kung Fu Nuns. And
Why?
if you
Why are they called that?
say they do all this kung fu stuff,
Oh, okay.
they became quite famous afterwards. But the nunnery was just in the middle of. I mean, there's a picture in the book. It was just in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And how do you live there? There was no village. There was nothing there at all. And they did it very well. We stayed in all these tents. There's a picture of all the tents, and they rigged up all these showers, lavatories. It was so clever the way they did it, but it was in the middle of nowhere. Just, it was probably maybe, I don't know, 40 or 50 miles from the nearest village, just in the mountains. Yeah, we were there for about a week or so.
Did they have electricity?
Yeah, they had power.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Continue. And then what were you? And then you left. And then what?
We left and we went back, and going back to Leh, which is the capital. So it was like, oh my God, it's like going back to the smoke. We go back to civilization after being in the middle of nowhere. Um, but it was quite, at the time it was quite tough. But because the problem was there was a lot of oxygen. It was high altitude,
Right. That's right.
so you needed oxygen up there, and a lot of people got ill because they were deprived of oxygen.
And it's just not comfortable in general to do. I know what you mean because up at the top of Mauna Kea on Hawaii Island, it's 13,000 feet, and I know exactly what you mean. It's beautiful, it's a majestic experience, but you can't think properly. It's very hard to work. You really
Yeah,
you admire people who can, because obviously a lot of folks sort of have
Yeah,
to work in places like that.
that's right. And there were a lot of people that were there just to trek. Not spiritual people, just
Sure.
people that were trekking,
Exploring.
uh, exploring the mountains and all that stuff. Same as Nepal, which was in a different place. It was to the east of there. But
What was your wildest experience in Nepal? And did you see any other famous rhinos when you were there?
uh, no, I think the apart from Ladakh, that was quite wild. But the best time was going into the Himalayas, to places like Darjeeling on the way to Sikkim, and seeing where all the English tea come from. It's all harvested in Darjeeling tea.
Wow.
And it was so interesting. And of course, the Himalayas are magical, amazing,
And you're
amazing.
staying in what kind of conditions? Like what kind of places were you lodging in?
Well, Buddhist theory is that it doesn't really matter where you stay. You
Right?
have to be very. There's a word for it. I don't know what it is, but uh, if you're either in a very classy hotel or you're in a real dump, but it's got to be all the same. You can't. You got to keep an even keel. Quite interesting.
Well, that's one of the cool things about this book for folks. Again, it's Jim McCarty, Yardbirds legend, and just one of our favorite guests over the years because we've gotten to have him on the show in person and on the phone, and he's just a really nice, warm, gentle cat. And they were at the Blue Note not that long ago, so we were thrilled to connect with him there. And just a fine drummer too. Anyway, there's this thing that I was thinking about when you were just talking about the humbling nature of all this. For a while in the '70s, you talk about in the book, share with folks. It may surprise them to learn you worked at a college, Imperial College. You were a mini cab driver, and you even drove for Meals on Wheels.
I know, I know. Um, yeah, it was quite interesting because a lot of people think, oh, you're in the Yardbirds, so you're all millionaires, which wasn't true because we lost a lot of the rights to our stuff, and we never really got paid for all our hits or anything, apart from the ones we wrote. We wrote Shapes of Things and Over, Under, Sideways, Down, so we were compensated by those. But things like For Your Love, Heart Full of Soul, Still I'm Sad, nothing. So
Wow.
Shapes of Things the same, although we did write that one. And so, I both half I had to make ends meet and also keep myself busy because wasn't always easy. I was sort of in and out of the music business, in different groups, and it wasn't always easy to keep abreast of music, keep an interest, people being interested in what you did. But I was lucky because I still had a finger in music, and I still came in and played in groups for a bit, and then I wrote more songs. And
On that note of the, just because I'm sure it's fascinating and it's humbling and it's how life is for a lot of people, and it's very I think it inspires people to know that it is a real world that you're in, and it isn't some fantasy and glamorous thing. And especially it's interesting when you have had a body of work from that era. And we've talked to a lot of people, Martha Reeves, all kinds of folks who are similarly, they had this huge era in the '60s, the Doors, John Densmore, all kinds of people come to mind. But on the note of the cab, were there ever any interesting cab rides you look back at, really important? You had an interesting cat in there it's a fun story to share that you think back on, and it just makes you laugh today.
I was always always a very shy person, and I got the feeling that being a cab driver was quite good for me because I had to talk to people, and there was a very fun bit. And I remember one time I took some Irish guys, and they were so funny. These guys were so funny. I had such a great time with them. I forgot I must have taken them quite a long way because the Irish, the bright Irish people have such a good sense of humour. It's so funny. And I loved it. I really got on well with them. And Yeah, I got on well with a lot of people. There's a lot of funny stories. But like when I used to go take these old people around that were quite challenged, and I took them to a day centre.
Right.
There was one person I took to a day centre near where I lived, and I was taking him home one night, and near where I lived, there was a river, and there was a ford, so you could drive through the river. But there'd been quite a bit of rain, so the river was quite flooded. But sort of like the idiot I was, I thought, oh, I could drive through. I went for it, and I got stuck right in the middle. And the poor old bloke was in the back.
Oh.
And so I had to, roll my sleeves up, roll my trousers up, get out of the car. This old guy was on my back. It was like something out of Robin Hood.
Oh, whoa! And you had him on your back to get him through the water.
Yeah, coming out of the water. But I was so lucky because there was a breakdown car, right? A breakdown, vehicle, right, standing there. And it pulled me right out. It pulled me straight out. So I was very lucky.
That's great. Well, that's a great story, and that's fun. It's great to hear you laughing about it, and it's one that's not in the book, so that's a great bonus for folks today. I love stuff like that. And so Turner, we've mentioned him several times, and it wouldn't be right to not address it because we've talked about the book a bunch. We talked about some of your earlier experiences that kind of predated it and led to that discovery being more possible, I guess, in one's life. But your career in the Yardbirds also meant some of the most well-known, well-respected, and admired guitar players in the world worked with you. They'd be part of your life. And so of the three cats, Eric Clapton was the first one, right? Of the three, can you share the story of both, like, of first meeting Eric Clapton? That would be the first one.
Well, Clapton came in. Actually, we did have somebody before Clapton called Topham.
Right. No, I know that. That's true. And then add that part of the story and then bring it to Clapton.
He was a bit younger than the rest of us, and he had problems with his parents because they wanted him to study at the art college, and he was actually a very good artist, and they didn't want him hanging out with us, playing all-night gigs and all this stuff. So they put pressure on him, and he had to leave. And he came from the same art college as Chris and Keith. But so did Derek. So they knew Eric was at the college, and they knew he had a bit of a reputation. So they asked him to join, and we were already going. Already had a bit of a name around, Southwest London or whatever. So he came for the audition, and he got the job.
You remember him coming that first time?
Yeah, and he was very dedicated. I remember when he first appeared, he was sort of quite cocky, and I thought, I don't know whether I like this guy. He's a bit cocky. He's a bit full of himself. He's which he is, isn't he? I mean, he's the same as he is now. But he did have something about him. Something that, some sort of dedication and some sort of profile, which became obvious as soon as we started to play. A lot of the girls all sort of hung around on his side of the stage rather than Keith. And Keith was the ideal front man. I mean, he looked like Brian Jones.
Right. He had the look.
You would have thought they'd all have gone for him, but they were all on Eric's side of the stage, because I could see, from where I was, I could see what was going on. And, Eric was very, very, very determined to play good blues. I mean, he practiced and practiced. He was very dedicated.
Were they already spray painting around London, Eric Clapton is God? When did that phenomena happen? Do you ever remember him reacting to that?
It was sort of a bit later, I think. He was with us, but okay. I remember being on a boat going down the Thames, and I looked up for this boat and I saw somebody had written it. from the boat, somewhat on one of the walls, on one of the wharfs or something. And I thought, oh my God, what's going on? Eric Clapton is gone. Um, but he was very.
You don't remember a reaction from him, I guess, is what I was saying.
No, I never got his reaction to it. Actually, I never
What?
did. I loved it.
He probably did, right? It was a huge. What's your favorite memory of any of the? Because I know the time with him wasn't very long, and then you were, of course, didn't. It's not as if you went on to not to have slouches in the band. You went on to have even more legendary cats. But like, if you reflect on that time, what's the thing that makes you laugh the most? As a fun memory with him.
At one point, I mean, we had a funny side to our relationship as well because he would sort of make up funny faces and take off weird people sometimes. And I remember once he came into the van and he had this old record player, and he said, "Oh, I've got this old record player and it doesn't work anymore. It's really rubbish." He said, "So I'm going to smash it up." And he got out of the van and he just smashed it into pieces. Everyone was laughing. Oh yeah, you know what I mean. So that was very bizarre. But Jeff did that sort of thing as well. So, but he did it out of his temper.
And that's a great lead-in. So that's that. So we go from Clapton, who goes on to have a career that a lot of folks obviously are quite familiar with, and explain Jeff coming into the band. I guess first meeting Jeff and anything relevant on that part of like how Jeff comes into the band and your first impressions of him.
Yeah, well, Eric was very, very keen on looking good, on the latest fashion, and he was very. I mean, he was very Ivy League at the time, had all the Ivy League, the Steve McQueen sort of look, and he got all his clothes from an Ivy League shop in the West End of London. He was always very smart, but when Jeff came along, he was just the opposite. He had long, sort of dirty hair, old leather jacket, and dirty old jeans with oil all over them because he'd been under a car doing something or other. So I thought, who is this guy? He's like the wild man. And in fact, our manager had to go and he had to ask Chris to take him over to Carnaby Street to get him a whole lot of new clothes. To smarten him up. But of course, he was a wild guitar player. I mean, he was a fantastic player. It was unbelievable. As soon as he got the guitar, he could just make it sound whatever. And he had loads and loads of different sounds and interesting gadgets and pedals and all that, and he was great, absolutely.
When you were on the road and traveling and doing stuff, when you think of Jeff and the time that you got to spend with him, and Jeff that's great what you said. He can make sounds there are just very few guitar players like him. I always think of he and Buddy Guy as having something similar because the way they would grab the guitar and hold it, it was strange. It was like they were very rough with the guitar in a way. They were so familiar with it. There aren't many people like that. And Jeff could get the thing to can still get it to make so many different sounds. When you were out there doing stuff with him, is there anything about working with Jeff on the road that sticks out that you have a fond memory of?
Well, there's a few funny stories. Quite a few. There's one. He had an old. He had an old car. I think it was an old Ford Zephyr or something like that, beaten up old, and he had a record player in it.
In the car.
Yeah, in the car that played the records, and the thing would always sort of get stuck, and he'd always be driving, quite fast, and he'd always lose his temper and smash the panel, Oh God, will you not play? Play properly. Because he was in a terrible temper. So he was very funny. And he'd always play some sort of rock record, some Platters or something like that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And what else comes to mind? You said you had a couple. Is there another one that pops in your head about Jeff?
Well, yeah, there's another one. We used to share a room together, him and I sometimes. And once we were in Scotland, and we had to get up early the next day to fly down to London for some interview or other, some magazine. So, we had to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning or something. So we ordered our breakfast in bed, and about 6 o'clock, there's a knock on the door, and there's this Scottish bloke comes in, and he's got these boiled eggs. So he says, "I got your eggs. I've got your eggs, sir." So we said, "Okay, thank you." But just leave them on the table. So he put them down, and then we started eating our eggs, and in Scotland they like to have them very hard, the very hard boiled eggs. I said, "Oh, these bloody eggs are too hard. We got to get up." So we lost our temper. We threw the eggs at the wall, and these eggs were all smashed all over the wall. Yeah. A bit silly, but a bit of a laugh. And also, we went to a place called the Isle of Arran. I think it was probably about the same time. And they didn't have a hotel. And so, oh, they've got no hotel for you, the band. You're going to have to stay with the villagers. So, so Jeff and I had to share a bed.
Whoa.
We had to, we had to share the same bed. It was really weird.
How many
So,
people can say that in their career?
waking up in the middle of the night with Jeff Beck right next to you, really weird.
What village was this again?
This was called the Isle of Arran. It's a little island off the top of the east coast of Scotland.
Okay. Wow. That's unbelievable. I mean, that's what I mean. You're up close and personal with these like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and as if that wasn't enough. I mean, that's what I mean. The stories and the perspective it really offers on the world,
Yeah,
really. Like, so Jimmy Page comes along, and I gotta say, just as an aside, so when the pandemic started, it was very intense to do what I do, which is mostly news related stuff. And I would come home and really need a release of some kind. And I ended up finding somehow I was looking at YouTube one night on the balcony and I was listening to something and it suggested it one of these Zeppelin bootleg soundboards that are out there. There's hundreds of these shows.
yeah,
And I started I said, I was like, and I really needed it at that moment, a distraction. And I put on something and maybe like 20-minute, 30-minute jam of some kind. You says, in the 70s, 75, 77, they would really stretch out those jams. And I got through the whole thing without ever thinking of the pandemic and one whole song at least. And then it started this thing. And so I've just it's been this huge resurgence, renaissance, therapeutic investment in time on the weekends because there's so much of it. And thank God those guys have plenty of money. So it is a strange phenomena that they lost control of so many soundboard recordings. But on the flip side, there is this element of it. So I guess I paint that to say like working with this guy, Jimmy Page, he has touched a lot of people's lives in a lot of ways. And it's
yeah.
and whether people needed hope, and it was Stairway to Heaven, and that brought that into their life for all the people who saw Zeppelin, or all the ways Zeppelin has been an inspiration, and all his other stuff. But anyway, his big part of his beginnings right there with you. So take us to Jimmy first entering your world at all, and any story, or just to give people context. Jimmy Page and entering the Yardbirds, replacing Jeff Beck.
Well, he was always a very quiet, a very well-mannered person. I mean, it didn't really relate to what happened in the Zeppelin, and all those stories. I mean, he was quiet and uh, very nice to you. And he said, "Oh, okay, well, let's play the song. And what do you want me to, what do you want me to play? And you want a solo here?" And because he'd been used to playing sessions, that he'd be used to playing what people wanted. So we played what we wanted, which was nice. And he was always such a nice guy, very quiet, and but of course he had another side to him
Right.
that he didn't show. He had all this sort of magical side that he never showed. So I didn't really know much about it, so I couldn't talk about it in the book. I mean, I didn't know.
Isn't that fascinating? Your own spiritual interests and stuff, and Keith's spiritual interests and stuff, and then Jimmy. In a lot of ways, I guess they're different than yours, but they are a. He's got to have a similar kind of, he's passionate, or he was passionate about some of related issues, I guess you could say.
Yeah, he never spoke about anything dark. Alistair Crowley. He never talked. Now and then he would talk about UFOs. He would say, "Oh, I know someone. You can look him up. He works in the UFO Society in London. Go and call him up and say he's a friend of mine and things like that." He would say, but he never spoke about anything mystical.
What's the best time you ever had with him that you enjoy, that you think back and be like, wow, I'm so glad we did that together, or a cool gig that sticks out? Because that's the other thing, is the concerts. So many times you guys would share the bill with somebody else. Major artists would be on the same bill with you cats, or just a fun time where you reflect on that moment having Jimmy in your band.
Well, he was always great fun. I mean, he was always a laugh, and he was always nice to be with. I had no complaints about him. He was great. There was one funny gig we played in Connecticut, I know, and I can't remember it very well, but I know it's a famous gig because Steve Tyler was there, and Steve Tyler was like before, years before Aerosmith, and Steve Tyler apparently helped Jimmy in with his gear.
Oh wow.
He humped his amplifier in for him or whatever, because he was a friend of our roadie Henry Smith.
Wow. So Steven Tyler as like a teenager.
Yeah, he was a young guy. He was just a young. He was probably in some band, but I don't know what.
And you remember meeting him at all in the late '60s?
I can't really remember.
Wow, but that's a great. I mean, and there was that Jimmy Page and the Flight into Disaster during the Yardbirds U.S. tour on that 707 aircraft. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, that was very odd.
Tell that story.
We were in the Midwest somewhere, and we were on a 707. We were all pissing about all the time. And then we made these little aeroplanes, paper aeroplanes, and we were crashing them, the plane's crashing. And when the thing took off, the 707 took off, it burst a tire when we took off. And we thought, oh my God, we're not playing games like that again,
Right.
They said, oh, we burst a tire, but we'll be okay. And I think the other end, was an hour journey or something. They foamed all the runway and everything, so we could land all right. So we were okay. But I remember getting off the aeroplane and it was on one side. it was down one side. Yeah, that would teach us to mess around with little games like that.
Man, that is frightening. That's we had Peter Frampton tell us a couple of crazy airplane stories too over the years. Well, finally, before we wrap it up, biggest musical hero, Jim, in a privileged life that's brought you into having three of the greatest, most admired guitar players of all time in your band, and so we've talked about them. But when you think of the other cats along the way who you've been able to bump into, just rub shoulders with, that maybe were kind to you, and maybe you were impressed by the class that they had and the way that they carried themselves, and maybe on the musical hero end or just in the celebrity end, or maybe one of each.
Yeah, well, I always liked Keith Moon. He was always a laugh. And
from the Who,
Keith Moon, great, fantastic drummer.
Yeah, from the Who. I'm like explaining for the listeners, just because I'm trying to pull a bigger audience in so they all know what we're talking about. Late Keith, Who drummer, died in the late '70s, and you knew him from when? Tell us a little Keith story.
Well, Keith. The Who used to play with us sometimes on different bills, and I remember we played in Paris one day, and we played on the same bill, and it was a big new idea. They were going to film it was a Ready Steady Go program, which was a TV rock show,
right,
which was like every Friday night, And so it was a big experiment. Oh, they were going to film it in Paris. So they filmed us and the Who in Paris, playing in this club. And we used the same. I used his drum kit, and we went on after the Who, and said, "Oh yeah, sure, come and use the drum kit," and it was covered in blood. There was blood all over his kit because he was so wild.
Right.
He smashed his fingers, on all the cymbals and the drums and everything, and he must have, bled quite a lot. I mean, he was probably taking pills, so he didn't feel anything. But I thought, oh my God, look at this kid, really, really wild.
And then you had to get on and play it after it, all covered in blood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it still sounded good, but it
Right.
just didn't look too bright.
Wow. And you were tight with him on a personal basis, or that was like
No,
a
no,
more of a cat that you looked up to and sort of.
yeah, he used to come to gigs sometimes, and he was always into the same sort of sense of humor. Sometimes we had these nose and moustache and glasses things, and he used to say, "Oh, I want one, give me one." And we sort of schoolboy humor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, well, that makes sense. He was a very loose cat, incredible, incredible drummer. On the note of Jimmy Page ends up with the guy who I played some drums when I was younger. I haven't played in a long time, but when I was younger, this guy was my very, very favorite in the whole world, and he really still is. John Bonham. Where are you on John Bonham? And do you have any cool John Bonham stories?
uh,
Like, what's your opinion of John as a drummer? And then do you have any cool
yeah,
encounters?
you're drawing them out of me, Dave.
They're good ones
Yeah,
though. You're doing the goodies.
yeah. I remember talking to him, and he said, "Oh, we had to do this tour with the Vanilla Fudge." And he said, "Oh, Carmine has this great big bass drum. So I couldn't play a little kit after him. So I made sure I got a big bass drum as well." And so he was very impressed by Carmine, and and of course he was a fantastic drummer. And he came to see us with another drummer in a club when we were in Renaissance. Keith and I were in Renaissance, and I went out into the bar, and him and this other drummer had all these pints of beer all laid out on the bar. And anyway, I was looking at them, and they started to throw these beers at
At the Who?
the optics behind, the whiskies and the gins and everything.
I
So
got
they were cracking. And the barman was saying nothing. I guess he knew who they were.
it.
Came off, and then they went out with these beers and they started pouring them over people dancing. Oh my God, I don't know if I want to be part of this. So that was really, in the that was really, I guess, what the Zeppelin used to do, smash up things, and
Yeah, that's
we
a
never
Bonham.
we never got into that. But they were very helpful because Keith's car didn't start, and they came out and pushed the car.
Yeah, John Bonham pushing the car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they were all down to earth guys.
And did you like him as a player? You haven't commented.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yes, he was a great player. Fantastic.
All right, I had to know what you thought of him. And then my other favorite was Cozy Powell.
Josie Power was great too. Yeah. I didn't have any stories with him, but I did meet him. Yeah.
Like you liked the playing,
Yeah, because he played with Jeff. He played with Jeff Beck for a
right?
while.
Yeah, yeah.
He was good. And he played with the did he play with the Turtles? Was that someone else?
He may have.
No, no.
I'd know him later on. And your favorite drummers then, as your final question, the favorite cats that you admire yourself as a drummer that you enjoy the way I shared mine.
When I used to like Joe Morello, from the Dave Brubeck, the guy with the great big glasses, who
All right.
played Take Five, with his eyes very magnified, but he was very cool. Um, and all the jazz drummers, and Hal Blaine was a great drummer, wasn't he?
Wow, listen to you. You got the history, guys. You're going
Yes,
deep.
he played on so many great tracks. He played on Pet Sounds and all that stuff, and Sonny and Cher and all those records. He was great.
So those are your two that you're naming.
Yeah. Oh
All right.
yeah.
All right, that's cool. I like that. You're digging deep. You're gonna make people go and look up stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I met Jimi Hendrix briefly. Jimmy was great, wasn't he? He was a very quiet cat,
Yeah.
but what a player, legend, complete legend.
Oh, you ran into so many different cats, and yeah, he was great. But on the drummer note, those are interesting choices. I'm saying to have gone out with. It's just those are deeper ones. It's the great Jim McCarty, Yardbirds, legendary member of the Yardbirds drummer, sharing his personal drum picks, some deep stuff people can search out. Say the names of those two cats again. It was Hal Blaine, and who was the first one?
Hal Blaine and Keith Moon.
Right, and there was another story right after Keith. Oh, the guy from Dave Brubeck's band,
Oh yeah, Joe Morello,
Joe
the jazz
Morello.
drum.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Keith Moon, Joe Morello, and Hal Blaine are his three names that he dropped us here. Legend from the Yardbirds and new book, She Walks in Beauty: My Quest for the Bigger Picture, the spiritual journey through his life, which he was telling us about, and a thrill. And you're all vaccinated, and hopefully you're going to be coming here at some point, right? At some point, we're going to see you again. Fingers crossed.
yeah,
We're gonna.
yeah. Of course, I'd love to come to Hawaii. I love it. It's a lovely place, beautiful.
All right. Well, we're going to. Did you have fun today? Was this remotely
Yeah,
engaging?
yeah. You got some stories there, Dave. I think I told more stories to you than anyone else.
Oh, it was a thrill. You did but you had fun. You enjoyed yourself.
I did very much so.
Uh,
Thank you for having me on.
you're very, very welcome.
Hello, everybody. This is Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds, and I'm back at one of my favorite places. Yet another fundraising campaign at HPR. It was a thrill to be on the Off the Road series. I've been a guest here many times with my friend Dave Lawrence. So please join our family right now. Here's how, and a big mahalo for your support.
All right, boss. Cheers, as you guys like to say. Is that a word you use sometimes? Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. I use that a lot.
Do you?
Yeah, on all my emails, I said cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. So, yeah, man, big hugs, big high fives. So much fun getting to reconnect with you. I love all the stories, and you really did.
Good. Well, I want to connect with you again in Honolulu.
We will. We'll make it happen. And please stay safe, my brother. And wishing you all the best. Really do appreciate your time. I'm super grateful, Jim.
And you. Thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
a lot.
Aloha,
See you,
brother.
Dave.
Take care,
Have a
brother.
nice. Cheers.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.